The colony streets were empty, silent under the cold glow of 2 moons. Shadows stretched long across the broken stone paths, and only the hum of distant machines filled the night. Most humans and aliens had already locked their doors, closing shutters against the bitter wind that carried dust from the outer fields. It was a night like many others, quiet and dark. Until a voice cut through the silence. A small boy ran down the street, his thin arms waving, his voice breaking with panic. "My mother won't wake up," he cried again and again, his words echoing between the stone walls. His eyes were wide, glowing faintly the way some alien children's eyes did. A mark of his people. He stumbled as he ran, his feet bare, his knees scraped, but he did not stop. He looked into every face he passed. But no one stopped for him. The boy's cry carried fear, desperation, and something more await that made the heart tighten. Yet the market guards turned their backs. The traders pulled their curtains closed, and even fellow aliens stepped away from the sound. Everyone feared sickness. Everyone feared trouble. Everyone feared being pulled into someone else's doom. To them, he was just another alien child with a problem too dangerous to touch. Better to look away, better to keep safe, better to pretend they never heard. But the boy would not stop. He fell to his knees in the dust, his hands clutching his face. "Please, somebody help. She won't wake up." "She's dying," he shouted, his voice breaking into sobs. The wind carried his words down the street, but silence answered him. Silence. Heavier than stone, his body shook, his small chest heaved, but his cries only made the shadows seem deeper. The colony had turned its back, and he was alone. Then, a sound of boots on stone broke through the silence, steady and strong. A man stood at the edge of the street, watching the boy. His clothes were worn, marked with oil stains, his hands rough. From years of labor, he was no soldier, no healer, no leader, only a human mechanic named Daniel. But his heart did not allow him to pass by. Daniel saw the boy's trembling form and felt something stir inside him. He had grown used to walking past suffering, used to seeing misery ignored in this colony. But tonight, the boy's voice cut deeper. It echoed in his chest like an old memory he could not escape. He stepped closer, his shadow stretching over. The child looked up, tears streaking his cheeks, and their eyes met. "What happened?" Daniel asked, his voice low but steady. The boy leaped forward, grabbing Daniel's hand as if it were the last rope keeping him from drowning. "My mother, she won't wake up. Please, you have to come. Everyone else is scared, but you." Stopped. His grip was small but fierce, a strength born from desperation. Daniel felt the boy's hand shake, and in that moment, he knew he could not walk away. "You shouldn't ask me," Daniel whispered, more to himself than to the child. Humans were not meant to interfere in alien matters, not in this part of the colony. The rules were strict, the punishments harsher. Still, when he looked down at the boy's pleading eyes, rules felt smaller, weaker, meaningless. "Take me." To her, Daniel said at last, his voice firm. The boy wasted no time. He pulled Daniel toward the dark alleys beyond the market square. The path narrowed, walls closing in, the air colder. Carrying the smell of damp stone, Daniel followed, his steps careful, his mind heavy with doubt. Every sound of dripping water, every rustle in the shadows made him uneasy. Yet the grip of the boy's hand kept him moving forward. The colony lights ended at the edge of the alley, and from there only the faint glow of alien lanterns lit the way. The boy's voice cracked as he spoke. "Nobody else would help. I thought no one cared. But then you came." Daniel said nothing, but inside, his heart ached at those words. He wondered what kind of world they had built, where a child's desperate cry could be ignored. What kind of people had they all become? Turning their faces away from suffering, at the end of the alley stood a crumbling house, its walls cracked, its door half broken. The boy pulled Daniel inside. The air heavy with dust and silence, Daniel felt the weight of something unseen pressing against him, as if the house itself wanted to keep secrets. In the corner of the room, on a worn-out bed, lay the alien mother. Motionless, her skin pale, her chest rising only faintly, her lips colorless. The boy fell to her side, clutching her hand, whispering in broken sobs, "Mama, I brought help. He came. He came." Daniel stepped forward, his heart pounding, his eyes taking in the strange marks glowing faintly on her skin. This was no simple sickness, no natural sleep. He felt a chill run through him, as if something else lingered in the shadows of the room, watching, waiting. The boy's cry had led him here, but Daniel was beginning to realize this was only the beginning. And outside, the night grew colder, as if the colony itself was holding its breath. One human had stopped, one human had answered, and now its choice would change everything. Daniel stood in the dim light of the broken house, the boy clutching his hand as though it were the only solid thing in a crumbling world. The alien mother lay on the bed, her breathing shallow, her body pale, her skin marked with faint glowing lines. Daniel's chest tightened as he looked at her. This was no ordinary fainting, no common sickness. It felt wrong, unnatural. The boy's eyes shimmered with tears, his small voice cracking. "You can help, right? You're human, you can fix things." Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. He was only a mechanic. He fixed ships, engines, and machines, not lives, not alien mothers. But the child's grip on his hand grew tighter, and those words, "You can fix things," stabbed into him. The colony had rules, strict rules. Humans were not to get involved with alien matters. Especially when illness or danger was involved, the council punished hard. People disappeared for less. Yet here he stood, staring at the dying woman and the desperate boy. For a moment, Daniel thought about leaving. He thought about pulling his hand free, walking out the broken door, and pretending none of this had ever happened. But the boy's eyes, wide and trembling, begged without words, begged with a force that no law could silence. Daniel had seen many things in his life broken. Ships, men crushed under machines, friends lost in accidents, but he had never seen a child so alone. That loneliness struck him harder than any threat. He bent down slowly, brushing hair from the woman's forehead. Her skin was cold, almost icy, yet her body glowed faintly as though something inside was burning her from within. The boy whispered, "They all ran away, even my own people. They said she is cursed, but I know she is not. She is my mama." The words hit Daniel like a stone. Cursed. That was enough for the neighbors to abandon her, to abandon the boy too. Fear ruled this colony. Stronger than compassion, stronger than law, stronger than humanity. Daniel looked around the small room. He saw no medicine, no food, only broken things and shadows pressing in. The boy tugged at him again, his voice rising. "You are the only one. If you leave, she will die. Please, don't leave, Daniel." Straightened, his jaw tight, his heart pounding. He thought of the council. He thought of the guards. He thought of the whispers that would spread if anyone saw him here. But above all, he thought of the boy's voice, shaking and raw, a cry that no one else had answered. He drew a breath, heavy and slow, then spoke. "Take me closer. I will see what I can do." The boy gasped, his face lighting with a fragile spark of hope. He pulled Daniel to the bedside. Daniel knelt, placing his hand gently on the woman's wrist. Feeling for a pulse, it was weak, faint, almost gone. Her chest rose and fell like the flutter of a dying flame. Every breath seemed like it might be her last. Daniel's hands trembled. He was no healer. He knew nothing of alien illnesses, but he knew life and death when he saw it. The boy leaned in close, whispering, "If you save her, I will never forget. I will do anything. Just save her, Daniel. Wanted to promise. He wanted to give the boy certainty, but he could not. Still, he could give something else courage. He met the boy's eyes and said firmly, I will try. And I will not run away like the others. The boy nodded quickly, tears dripping onto his mother's hand. The sound of wind outside rattled the broken window. The colony beyond continued its silence. Daniel knew that by helping, he was choosing a dangerous path, one that could change everything for him. But walking away was worse. Walking away would make him just another shadow in this colony of cowards. He rose to his feet, scanning the room again. He saw faint movement at the edges of the walls, shadows shifting unnaturally. His chest tightened. He remembered how the boy had said they all ran away, cursed, not sickness. No, something else was here. He clenched his fists, his voice firm. Boy, stay behind me. There is something more in this room than sickness. The child shivered but obeyed. Pressing himself close to Daniel's side, Daniel's mind raced. He was no fighter. Yet he felt the weight of the choice he had made. He could leave, return to safety, but then the boy would be left to shadows and death, or he could stay, stand against whatever haunted this house. Stand against the fear that had silenced the colony. He looked down at the boy, trembling but brave. And Daniel knew his answer. I will stay, Daniel said quietly. As if sealing his fate, the boy looked up at him, hope shining through his tears, a hope that was fragile but alive. Daniel tightened his grip on the broken pipe he had carried from the street. It was no weapon, but it was something. He stepped forward into the deeper darkness of the house, his heart pounding, his breath steady, outside. The colony was still, pretending not to hear, pretending nothing was happening. But inside this broken house, a single human had chosen to stand, to defy rules, to face shadows for the sake of a child's cry. And though Daniel could not see it yet, that choice would ripple far beyond this night. It was the choice that would turn fear into courage, despair into hope, and silence into a story that no one could ignore. The boy pulled Daniel deeper into the house. The wooden door creaked shut behind them. And suddenly the world outside felt far away. The air inside was heavy, stale, carrying the smell of dust and something faintly metallic. The single lantern flickered weakly, its blue light casting long shadows across the cracked walls. Every sound seemed louder here, even the boy's breathing, even Daniel's slow steps. Across the rough floor, the house was small, only 2 rooms. But silence filled it as if it were a vast hall. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of fear, thick and pressing, a silence that seemed alive. Daniel felt it pushing against his ears, weighing on his chest. As though the house itself wanted to keep its secrets hidden, the boy kept close to his side, clutching his sleeve, whispering, "They come at night. They hide in the walls." Daniel's eyes narrowed. He looked around, searching, but he saw no movement, only the faint glow from the woman's skin where she lay on the bed. The marks on her arms and neck glimmered softly, almost like veins of fire beneath her skin. He stepped closer, the boy's grip never loosening, and knelt again at the woman's side. Her breath was shallow, her eyelids trembling as though she fought unseen chains. Daniel brushed his hand against the wooden bed frame, and it was cold, far colder than the rest of the room. He frowned, a chill running through his spine. This was not natural cold. This was something else. The boy whispered again, his voice breaking. No one else came. They said if you enter, you'd never come out. Daniel looked at him sharply, but the boy's face was pure truth. He was not lying. The mechanic leaned closer to the woman, placing his ear near her chest. He heard a heartbeat, weak but steady, yet beneath that heartbeat, he thought he heard something else, a faint hum, almost like a low vibration. It pulsed through the floorboards, through the air, through his bones. He pulled back quickly, his jaw tight, muttering under his breath, "This house isn't dead, it's breathing." The boy looked at him with wide eyes. Breathing. Daniel shook his head, not answering. Instead, he reached for the lantern and held it higher. The light reached the corners of the room. And there he saw it, the shadows did not behave like shadows should. They moved, shifting slightly against the walls, rippling like dark water disturbed by invisible hands. Daniel's grip tightened on the broken pipe he carried. His muscles tense. The boy whimpered, pressing closer. "Do you see them too?" The other said I was lying. Daniel nodded once, his face grim. "I see them." The house groaned, then, wood creaking as if under great weight. Though no wind touched it, the silence deepened, heavy enough to make Daniel's ears ring. He took a step back, his boots scuffing against the stone floor. And the shadows seemed to follow. Not fast, not leaping, but slowly, deliberately. As though they enjoyed the fear they spread, the boy clutched his mother's hand, whispering her name, begging her to wake. But her eyes stayed closed. Daniel raised the pipe, his voice low but firm. "Stay behind me." The boy obeyed, tears glistening in his glowing eyes. Daniel's chest rose and fell steadily. His heart beat loud in his ears. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to get out of this cursed house, but he stayed. The silence was broken suddenly by a faint whisper, not from the boy, not from the woman, but from the walls themselves. The sound was soft, alien, like many voices speaking at once, but too faint to understand. Daniel's grip tightened, his knuckles white. The boy's lip trembled. "That's them. That's what they say every night." The lantern flickered harder, and the shadows swelled, stretching longer across the walls for a heartbeat. Daniel thought he saw shapes within them, twisted faces, hollow eyes, mouths open in silent screams. He took a step forward, pipe raised high, defiance burning in his eyes. "I don't care who you are," he growled under his breath. "You won't take her tonight." The house answered with another groan, louder this time, as if mocking him. The mother's breath hitched, her chest rising sharply before sinking again. The boy cried out, holding her tighter, "Mama, please, wake up." But her body remained still, caught between life and death. Daniel turned his gaze back to the shadows, his voice firm. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." His words seemed to echo in the silence, bouncing back off the walls with strange weight. For a moment, the shadows paused, still and watchful, as if measuring this human who dared to stand against them. The silence deepened once more. Then came the sound of a soft hiss, low and menacing. The boy clung tighter to Daniel, whispering, "They're angry now." Daniel did not flinch. He had made his choice when he stepped into this house. Every breath he took was heavy with fear, but also with resolve. He had seen many battles with machines, but never one like this. The lantern's flame flared suddenly, filling the room with harsh blue light. The shadows shrank back for a moment, then swirled. Pressing harder against the walls, Daniel raised the pipe higher. His teeth clenched. The boy whispered again, "They come closer at night. They never stop. They want her soul." Daniel's mind raced, but his heart was steady. He looked down at the boy, then at the mother, then back at the walls. He was only one man, only human. But he had already made the choice no one else dared make, to stay, to fight, to protect. Even if the cost was his own life. And as the silence thickened once more, Daniel stood tall, ready for the storm that was about to come. Daniel stood firm, the broken pipe in his hands, his eyes fixed on the unnatural shadows moving across the walls. The boy clung tightly to his mother's hand, small body shaking, but his gaze never leaving Daniel. The silence in the house was no longer still. 'Twas alive, thick with whispers and faint hissing that crawled through the air. The mechanic's heart pounded, but his voice remained steady as he muttered, "I won't run, not tonight." The lantern flickered again. And this time, the light caught something from the corner of the room. The shadows peeled themselves away from the wall. Stretching like living smoke, they slithered across the cracked floor. Their shapes shifting, never clear, never whole. But Daniel could see sharp edges, claws, and faces that were not faces. The boy gasped, whispering, "They're here," his voice breaking with both fear and recognition. Daniel tightened his grip on the pipe, the cold iron grounding him, his breath even though fear clawed at his chest. The shadows circled, slow, deliberate, like predators tasting the fear in the room. The woman's body stirred faintly, her head turning slightly, but she remained trapped in her silent prison. Her glowing marks pulsed faster, brighter. As if the creatures were feeding on her life force, the boy cried out, "Stop it, leave her alone." But his words bounced back as empty echoes. Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between the shadows and the bed, his stance strong, though he was only one man. He raised the pipe high, his voice sharp, "If you want her, you'll face me first." The shadows froze for a moment, and the whispers grew louder, overlapping like 1,000 broken voices. One of the shapes lunged forward suddenly, its form half solid, half mist. With claws stretched out, Daniel swung the pipe with all his strength, the iron cutting through the air with a sharp whistle. The blow struck, and the creature let out a hiss that rattled the walls. The form shattered like smoke caught in a storm, scattering into fragments before reforming at the edge of the room. Daniel staggered, but did not fall. His hands tight around the pipe, his eyes blazing with defiance. The boy gasped in awe. "You heard it. No one ever hurt them before." Daniel nodded once, sweat dripping from his brow. "Then they can bleed, or they can break, and that means they can be stopped." The whispers turned into an angry chorus, a sound that rattled the glass in the lantern. 2 more shadows pulled away from the wall, circling faster, their bodies twisting like smoke and fire. They darted forward together, one from the left, one from the right. Daniel spun, swinging the pipe wide, striking the first, the iron passing through and forcing the creature to shriek before dissolving. But the second brushed against his arm, the cold touch burning like ice. Making his muscles seize for a moment, Daniel gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand, forcing himself to fight. The boy cried out, "Behind you," and Daniel turned. Just in time, another shadow surged forward, taller, darker, its face a hollow void with eyes like embers. Daniel thrust the pipe forward like a spear, stabbing into its chest. And again the shadow scattered into smoke. The house groaned louder, now as if angry at the fight within it. The walls cracked, dust falling from the ceiling, the lantern shaking on its hook. The woman on the bed gasped, her body jerking, her glowing marks pulsing brighter as though tied to the battle. Daniel looked at her, then at the boy, realizing that these things would not stop until she was gone. The boy's voice broke, trembling but strong. "Every night they come. Every night she grows weaker. They want her soul. They want to take her away." Daniel's heart burned with fury. How many nights had this child faced this alone? How many nights had the colony ignored his cries? He raised the pipe again, his voice hard. "Not tonight. Not while I'm here." The shadows hissed back, circling faster, their movements sharper now, no longer playing but preparing to strike in force. Daniel's muscles ached, his body heavy with exhaustion already, but his spirit burned brighter. He was only human, only a mechanic, but in this moment he was more. The boy's faith in him, the desperation in those young eyes. gave him strength that no law, no rule, no fear could break. He stood tall, facing the darkness, a wall of flesh and bone against creatures of shadow. The lantern flared once more, bright blue fire, filling the room. The shadows screamed, recoiling. As the light struck them, but even as they pulled back, more began to rise. Daniel could see them now, crawling from the cracks, dripping from the ceiling like black tar, slithering out of the floorboards, dozens of them, their whispers rising. Into a storm of rage, the boy clung tighter to his mother, crying, "Please, don't let them take her, please." Daniel's chest swelled with resolve, his voice breaking the chorus of whispers. "You'll have to go through me, and I won't fall easy." The shadows paused, their forms quivering. The air colder now, biting against Daniel's skin. The house felt like a trap closing in, but Daniel's spirit burned hotter, defiant against the night. As the horde of shadows prepared to strike, Daniel raised the pipe high again, his eyes locked with the darkness. He was ready, ready to fight, ready to bleed, ready to give everything for a boy's desperate cry. Because he knew now that this was not just about one alien mother, not just about one frightened child. It was about standing where no one else would. It was about being human in a world that had forgotten what that meant. The air was alive with whispers, shadows twisting like black smoke, filling the room with their cold presence. Daniel stood in the center, the broken pipe clutched in his hands, sweat dripping down his face, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The boy held his mother tightly, his small eyes locked on Daniel, trembling but filled with hope. The house shook with every hiss of the creatures, the floorboards groaning as though the weight of the darkness was crushing it. Daniel's arms ached, his body tired, but his spirit was steel. He had faced machines that crushed men, engines that exploded without warning, accidents that took lives in an instant, but never before had he stood against monsters made of shadow, monsters that fed on life itself. And yet, in this moment, he refused to give in. He refused to step back. The first shadow darted forward, a blur of smoke and claws. Daniel swung the pipe with a grunt, the iron striking through its body, scattering it into a cloud of shrieking mist. Before he could breathe, two more lunged from the walls, twisting, clawing, their bodies rippling like water. Daniel spun, his pipe cutting through the first, but the second brushed against his shoulder, burning him with cold fire. He cried out, his knees nearly buckling, but he did not fall. The boy screamed, "Don't stop, please, don't stop," his small voice cutting through the storm of whispers. Daniel forced himself up, his jaw clenched, his eyes blazing. "No," he growled, his voice low but full of fire. "I won't stop, not while you still need me." The shadows circled tighter, their whispers rising like 1,000 angry voices. Daniel's hands bled from gripping the pipe, but he held on, every muscle screaming in pain. The largest shadow rose from the corner, taller than a man, its form solid for the first time, its face hollow with burning eyes. The boy gasped, "That's the one. That's their leader." Daniel's heart pounded, but his fear burned into anger. He stepped forward, pipe raised high, and shouted, "Then come." "I'm waiting," the shadow hissed, the sound sharp enough to rattle the windows. It lunged, claws stretching wide, but Daniel swung with all his strength, the pipe smashing into its chest. The impact shook the room. The shadow staggered, splitting into dark streams before pulling itself back together. Daniel stumbled, nearly falling, but planted his feet firm. The boy's eyes widened, awe mixing with fear. "You heard it? No one ever heard that one." Daniel spat blood from his lip and nodded. "Then it can bleed. And if it can bleed, I can break it." The smaller shadows shrieked, swarming closer, clawing at the air. Daniel swung again and again, his body screaming in pain. But he did not stop. Each strike shattered one, but more replaced them, the room filling with smoke and cold fire. His arms burned, his back ached. But his heart beat steady, stronger with every cry of the boy behind him. The mother stirred faintly, her body jerking with every strike Daniel landed. The glowing marks on her skin pulsed brighter, as if life itself was tied to the battle. Daniel saw it, realized it, and shouted, "They're tied to her. If I keep fighting, she will wake." The boy cried louder. "Then fight. Fight harder." The leader's shadow hissed again, lunging, claws. Like blades, Daniel raised the pipe, blocking the strike, the force sending him crashing back into the wall. Pain shot through his ribs, his breath shallow, but he forced himself up. The boy shouted, "Get up, don't let it win." Daniel roared, a sound filled with defiance, filled with fury. He charged, swinging the pipe with wild strength, the iron glowing faintly from the contact of shadow against steel. The leader staggered, its chest cracking open with a blast of dark smoke. The smaller shadows wailed, their forms flickering like dying flames. The boy gasped, "You're beating them." Daniel's body felt broken, but his spirit burned like fire. He swung again, each strike pushing the shadows back. The house shook, dust falling from the ceiling. The lantern's light burning brighter, as if feeding on Daniel's will. The leader reeled, its hollow eyes burning weaker, its shape struggling to hold. Daniel lifted the pipe one last time, his voice a growl. "Not tonight, not ever again." He brought it down with a final strike. Smashing through the shadow's chest, the creature screamed, a sound that rattled the whole house, before exploding into smoke that vanished into the cracks of the floor. The silence that followed was heavy, the whispers fading, the shadows shrinking. Back into the walls, Daniel stood, chest heaving, his hands shaking, but his eyes fierce. The boy sobbed, not in fear, but in relief, clinging to his mother's hand, whispering, "He saved us. Mama, he saved us." The woman stirred again, her breathing stronger now, the glow on her skin fading as though life was returning. Daniel dropped to one knee, his body finally giving in to exhaustion, the pipe clattering to the floor. He looked at the boy, at the woman, and for the first time, a faint smile touched his tired face. "You're safe," he whispered, his voice hoarse but steady. The boy rushed forward, wrapping his small arms around Daniel, his tears wetting the human shoulder. The mechanic closed his eyes, the pain in his body sharp, but his heart lighter than it had ever been. He had stood where no one else dared. He had defied fear, defied rules, defied the darkness itself. And though the night was not over, Daniel knew one thing was true. He had proven that even against shadows, even against death, the will of a human heart could not be broken. The room was quiet after the storm of shadows. The whispers that once filled the air had faded into silence. Only the sound of Daniel's heavy breathing remained, each breath sharp and painful, his body trembling with exhaustion. The broken pipe slipped from his hands and clattered onto the floor, its metal echoing through the empty house. Dust floated in the air, lit by the faint glow of the lantern, making the silence feel almost unreal. The boy was still clinging to Daniel's shoulder, his small body shaking with sobs that carried both fear and relief. He whispered over and over, "You saved us, you saved us." As though the words themselves could make it true, Daniel placed a rough hand gently on the boy's head, his voice low, hoarse, but steady. "It's not over yet. Look at her." The boy pulled away, wiping his tears with the back of his hand, and turned his gaze to the bed. The alien mother lay still, her body pale and cold. But there was something different now. The strange glowing marks that had once burned across her skin had begun to fade, leaving only faint traces behind. Her chest rose and fell more strongly, no longer shallow like before. Her breathing steadying with each passing moment, the boy gasped, his glowing eyes wide. "She's breathing. She's really breathing, Daniel." Moved closer, lowering himself to one knee beside the bed, his body aching with every motion. He leaned forward, watching her face, waiting, hoping. His own heart pounding in rhythm with hers. The lantern flickered gently. Casting light across her features, her eyelids trembled. A faint movement that sent the boy crying out, "Mama, open your eyes, please. Please wake up." Slowly, painfully, her eyelids lifted, and two faintly luminous eyes looked out into the dim room. At first, they were distant, lost, unfocused, as though she had been wandering in darkness for a long time, but then her gaze fell on the boy, and her lips parted in a weak breath. A sound that was both a sigh and a whisper. "My son," she breathed, her voice so faint it was barely more. Then the boy collapsed onto her chest, his tears falling freely now, his voice breaking with joy. "Mama, you're awake. You came back?" She lifted a trembling hand, her fingers brushing against his hair. Weak but full of love, her body was frail, yet her touch carried warmth, a warmth that the boy had thought was lost forever. Daniel turned away for a moment, giving them the space of reunion, his own throat tight with emotion he had not expected to feel. When he looked back, her eyes were fixed on him, wide and shining with confusion and recognition. She tried to speak, her voice breaking, the alien tongue mixing with broken human words. "You? Human. You saved us." Daniel shook his head, his voice firm but gentle. "I only stood where no one else would." The boy pulled back, looking between his mother and Daniel, his small hands clutching hers tightly. "He fought them, Mama, the shadows. He didn't run like the others. He stayed. He saved you." Her eyes filled with tears, shimmering in the faint light. She reached out her hand, weak and trembling, toward Daniel. He hesitated, then took it gently, his rough human hand closing around her fragile alien fingers. Her skin was cool, but warmth pulsed faintly through her veins, proof that life was still within her. She whispered again, her words clearer now. "You gave back what I thought was gone." Daniel said nothing. He only nodded, because words felt small in a moment like this. The boy buried his face against her chest again, whispering softly, "I thought I lost you. I thought I was alone." Her arms wrapped around him weakly, her body trembling with the effort, but her heart strong with love. "No, my son, I am here. I will not leave you," she whispered, her tears wetting his hair. Daniel turned away again, staring at the lantern, letting them have their moment, but inside, his chest felt lighter, as though he had carried their burden and now it was lifting from him. The house no longer groaned, the shadows no longer stirred. The silence was now true silence. It was as if the creatures had been banished with her awakening, their power broken when life returned to her. The boy looked at Daniel again, his small face glowing with gratitude. "She's alive because of you. I'll never forget this." Daniel sighed, leaning back against the wall, his body aching, but a faint smile touched his lips. "You don't need to thank me," he said softly. "Just live. Take care of her. That's enough." The boy shook his head fiercely, his eyes sharp with determination. "No, I'll remember forever. I'll never forget the human who saved us." The mother looked at him too, her voice quiet but filled with truth. "We will not forget. You are part of us now." Daniel looked away, the weight of those words pressing against him, heavier than any law, heavier than any rule. For the first time in a long time, he felt something in his chest that he had almost forgotten. It was hope, small and fragile, but alive. The boy lay beside his mother, clinging to her, refusing to let go. Daniel stood again, weak but steady, his eyes scanning the quiet house. knowing the night was not fully safe, but he also knew one thing. The worst had passed. The mother had awakened. The boy was no longer alone, and whatever came next. He had already crossed the line. He had chosen to stand when no one else would. That choice could not be undone. It would change everything, and as he looked at the mother and son together, Daniel knew he would not regret it, not for a single moment. The night outside had grown calm. The winds that once howled through the colony streets now carried only silence. Inside the broken house, the alien mother lay awake, her body weak, but her spirit slowly returning. The boy curled against her side, refusing to let go, his small hands clutching her clothes as if to prove she was truly there. Daniel stood near the door, leaning against the cracked wall, his body aching from battle, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. For a long time, no one spoke. The only sound was the slow rhythm of breathing. The fragile music of life reclaimed. Daniel closed his eyes, just for a moment, letting the weight of the night settle on his shoulders. He had fought creatures no human was meant to face, shadows that no one dared name, and yet here they were, mother and child alive, safe, because he had chosen not to turn away. The mother's weak voice broke the silence. "Why did you stay?" she asked, her words trembling but clear. Daniel opened his eyes, meeting hers, his voice low, steady, "Because no one else would, and I couldn't let him stand alone." The boy lifted his head, his eyes still shining. "With tears, everyone else left us. They said we were cursed, but you didn't leave." Daniel's chest tightened. He had no answer for that, only a faint nod. Because the truth was too heavy to put into words, the mother's hand trembled. As she reached for Daniel again, her voice softer now, "In our ways. When one stands for another, a bond is made, stronger than law, stronger than fear." Daniel frowned slightly, unsure, but said nothing. He simply listened. She continued, "You are human, yet you fought for us. You gave us back life. In my people's eyes, that makes you family." The boy's face lit up with a fragile smile. Turning toward Daniel, "Does that mean he's my brother now?" Daniel blinked, surprised by the question, his lips parting but no words coming out at first. The boy waited, his gaze wide and hopeful, his small hands gripping his mother's tighter. Daniel sighed, rubbing his forehead with a tired hand. But then he allowed a small smile, faint but true. "If that's what you want," he said gently, "then yes, I'll be your brother." The boy laughed through his tears, his face glowing with joy. "I have a brother now. Mama, we're not alone anymore." The mother's eyes softened, her gaze warm despite the weakness in her body. "Yes, my son, we are not alone, thanks to him." Daniel looked away, embarrassed by their gratitude, but inside his chest, something stirred. Something warm and steady. It had been years since he had felt truly connected to anyone. Yet here, in this ruined house, he felt it again. Outside, the colony remained silent, the neighbors still hiding behind closed doors. But whispers had already begun to spread. Voices carried in the night about the human who had entered the cursed house. Some whispered with fear, some with awe, but all carried the same truth. One man had done what none dared to do, and though Daniel knew the council would not ignore this, he also knew he would not take back his choice. The boy sat up suddenly, his eyes sharp, his voice filled with determination. "They can't hurt us now, not while you're here." Daniel looked at him, shaking his head slowly. "I can't promise safety forever. The council will come. The whispers will grow. People will fear what they don't understand." The boy frowned, but held firm. "Then let them fear. As long as we have each other, they can't take that away." Daniel stared at him for a long moment, surprised by the strength in his young voice, and then he nodded. The mother closed her eyes briefly, her voice still weak but carrying weight. "You are right, my son. We may face fear tomorrow, but tonight we rest together." Daniel stepped closer to the bed, kneeling down beside them once more. He placed a hand over the boy's small one, and for a moment the three of them sat, connected in silence, different worlds, different blood, but bound now by choice, by courage, by something deeper than law. The lantern flickered softly, casting warm light across their faces. The house no longer groaned with shadows. Daniel thought of the future, of the questions that would come, the dangers that might rise, but then he looked at the boy's smile, at the mother's tear-filled eyes, and he knew the fight had been worth it. Sometimes humanity's greatest strength was not power, not weapons, but the simple act of standing when no one else would. The boy leaned against him now, half asleep, his voice a soft whisper. "Brother, don't leave us. Stay with us." Daniel's throat tightened, his hand resting gently on the child's shoulder. "I'll stay. You're not alone anymore." The mother smiled faintly, closing her eyes, her breathing even. Peace finally settling into her body, and Daniel stayed there, watching over them, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Outside, the stars shone bright above the colony, silent witnesses to a story that would spread beyond these walls. A story not of laws, not of curses, but of one human who chose compassion over fear. The boy would remember, the mother would remember, and perhaps even the colony would remember in time. That night in the House of Silence, a bond was born, a bond beyond worlds, a bond that no shadow could ever break.